and good morning and welcome to UDL, a pathway to the California Alt Pathway to a high school diploma for students with significant cognitive disabilities, presented by Kristin Wright and Stephanie Coleman. I'm Dan Daher, the SIP coordinator out of the Riverside County Office of Education, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this breakout session. Just a couple of logistics before we get going. This session will be recorded and archived on the conference agenda page after the conference for about a month. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. The interpretation icon in the same area will provide access to Spanish translation. We will ensure the ASL interpreters are spotlit along with the PowerPoint, and please ensure your volume is muted to avoid background distractions while presenters speak. We encourage you to engage with others in the chat, and when possible, keep your camera on so we can see your beautiful faces. And with that, Kristin and Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome everyone. We are here today, Stephanie Coleman and I'm Kristin Wright, and I'm here at the Sacramento County Office of Education. And we welcome you to this incredible conference today. And thank you to SIP for putting this on so we can all be together. I am the Executive Director of Equity, Prevention, and Intervention at the Sacramento County Office of Education. And together with my partner, Stephanie Coleman, we also are the directors of California Includes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Coleman. I'm the coordinator at Sac County Office of Ed. I'm the coordinator of Inclusive Practices and Integrated Systems. And just to help you navigate a little bit through the materials that we have today, there is a bit.ly at the top of the screen, but most of you should have been able to access our home-based document. And I want to show you what that looks like briefly. Just a second. Okay. This home-based document was the only available document that you should have been able to access from the main session, and it has access to our slides, our feedback survey, this home-based doc, and all of the resources that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to go back to the bit.ly so you can see where that is. Actually, that's a different one. It's this one right here that all of you are going to want access to. You can also use your phone to get the QR code if that's helpful. And I'm going to give you about 20 seconds or so to get that, just so we make sure everybody has the resources needed for today. And it's very exciting to see so many of you here. We see lots of people we know and lots of people we don't. And we're glad that you all are joining us today for this really exciting. Oh, you know what? That's so smart. Yes, I can totally do that. I even have it right on my screen, and 150 people are overwhelming me a little bit. So it is in the chat right now. We'll take you straight to the home-based doc. So save that somewhere and you will have access to it. We update those documents on a frequent basis. So now I don't have to stay there. Thank you for the reminder. We just want to give you a couple of things to note beyond the accessibility that SIP has given for this conference, which is phenomenal. We also have universally designed this presentation for you. It's also culturally responsive, and we have made sure to embed social emotional competencies throughout our presentation today. As I shared with you, you have a toolkit you have access to a toolkit that's been designed to provide information on everything around the California alternative pathway to a high school diploma for students with significant cognitive disabilities, which includes our full slide deck. You're going to see a portion of that today. We've also created an LEA guide, a family guide, and a quick reference sheet for what is the alt pathway. And you are welcome to use those materials however would be helpful within your particular role. All right. So before we get too deep, we want to know who all of you are. There's 186 people in this room, which is phenomenal. And we would also like to have a sense of how are you right now? So what racer are you today? So if you can tell us who you are, where you're from, maybe what your role is. Are you an educator? Are you a parent, a family member? What is your role? And then also tell us what kind of racer you are. Oh, we have such a great diverse audience. And I'm going to give a shout out because when your college professor shows up to your presentation, that's exciting. So welcome, Dr. Cho. I'm glad you're here. We have lots of #1 racers ready to go. All right. Well, we're going to continue to look through that chat to see who's here as we both bounce back and forth between presenting today. So if you haven't had a chance to put that in, please feel free to. But I'm going to hand it back to Kristin now.
So before we get into some serious content, I want us to imagine a world. It's a world that's completely within our reach. It's a world that is universally designed and accessible for all people. It's a world without self-imposed systems barriers, and it's full of people that value and embrace the amazing diversities of human beings. And I know that's obviously everyone on this call, but we're hoping that it's beyond this call or beyond this Zoom meeting that we're on today. It's a world that everyone feels a deep sense of belonging, and a world where everyone can get a high school diploma. So with that, we're going to talk just for a minute about presuming competence. And in order for us to truly value that a high school diploma is important and worth something for every student, it's really important that we are presuming competence to begin with. And that was initially a term coined by a researcher named Anne Donnellan way back in 1984. So this is not new. And she proposed that teachers should assume that all students, regardless of intellectual ability, are competent and able to learn, and that they should be provided with every opportunity to learn. And she proposed that if they learn, that's wonderful. Even if they don't learn everything after being presented with every opportunity, the consequences are not as dangerous as the alternatives. And so setting high expectations is far better than accepting low expectations. And that's really what we're about. So providing a rich, inclusive learning environment is better than accepting less and discovering when it's too late that a student had capabilities and potential that we missed. And I know in some of our other presentations you'll hear today about how we're seeing students in college with amazing opportunities that if we had given them a lot more to build on, they would have had even greater opportunities. So this is where we have to operate from, to believe that every learner can and deserves to earn that high school diploma. And so that's where we are. Steph?
All right. So what does that mean? And how can we do that? How can we embrace it? And how meaningful is this? Well, we wanted you to hear it from students, because who better than to share the value of presuming competence than students themselves? And so we have this choice board for you, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now that will take you straight to this choice board. And we are only going to have 5 minutes for you to choose some of the selections and peruse them. You can note the social media posts have an Instagram icon. The videos have the play button. The articles are the ones that look like a computer article, and those are also potentially blog posts. So choose one to take a look at in the next 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back together and have an opportunity to kind of share what is one aha or question or something that you're sitting with after watching that. So make your choice, and then know that you can hold on to this and come back to it and look at it again in the future to look at more opportunities to hear student voice. And or my hope is that you will take this choice board and share it with others so you can continue this dialogue beyond just today's discussion. So take a quick click on that link so it takes you to this choice board, and spend 5 minutes choosing 1 or 2 options to take a look at. I'm going to interrupt for just a second. If some of you are having a difficult time with the audio on the videos, it could be because you have Zoom running and your computer is having a difficult time like bringing those two things together. So just keep it on your computer, and maybe during lunch while you're enjoying some lunchtime, listen to some great student voice. It should work fine potentially when Zoom is not running. And if not, please email me and I will send you direct links to everything.
I'm so sorry. I just hear silence. Is there a presentation going on that I'm not hearing?
There is. Everybody's in a choice board right now. So if you would like a copy of the choice board, we're about to come back anyways, but let me give you the link so you have access to it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, there is our timer. So we're going to bring you all back together. If you wouldn't mind, I know Otto is our keynote speaker tomorrow. Kevin, I have to let you know, I'm so excited. I was like jumping up and down when I saw that. Otto's amazing. So you're going to want to come hear him tomorrow morning. It's going to be amazing to have him share his experience with all of us. So if you didn't hear a little bit of it, if you did, then you get a sneak peek and know why you need to tell all your friends to come tomorrow to the keynote. That being said, we would love to hear what one aha or question or something that you're sitting with, aside from we know that they're all amazing. Maybe something that they said specifically that spoke to you. And if you could drop that in the chat so we can all learn from each other, that would be wonderful. Sorry, I'm skipping around all on the slides because my choice board makes my slides get a little wonky, so I apologize for that.
Okay, so we know, so to cue all this up that we're going to talk about today around the alternate pathway to a high school diploma, and thank you for all of these fabulous pieces of feedback, and yes, all to that, assuming confidence, communication, yes, Megan. So knowing that we have this pathway for every single student to earn a high school diploma, we also really want to think about backward mapping that in our minds to what needs to be in place, right? So there's some questions that we really need to ask ourselves as educators, as parents, as students. Are students having the opportunity to learn grade level academic standards? That's a big one. Grade level academic standards. Are teachers adequately trained in the elements of universal design and multi-tiered system of support? We're demonstrating here today some of the elements of universal design, what you just experienced in the last slide, where everyone experienced what they wanted to and the way they wanted to learn it is one element. Are teachers in multi-grade separate settings set up for success to teach grade level standards across multiple grade levels of students in their classrooms? It's a lot to ask of our teachers to teach many grade levels of academic content standards. But the reality is, and the law is, that every student should have access to their grade level standards, regardless of what kind of setting they're in, whether they're in a separate setting, a non-public school setting, a general education setting, a resource setting, every setting. And if we're thinking about what needs to happen in high school, and we're going to go into that in a few minutes, we're going to need to have students getting access to their grade level standards. And so for many of you who know that our state standards are stair-stepped, they build up over time on skills that are necessary for the next grade level in order to build all the way up to high school. So to have those skills in place by high school will allow our students, even with the most significant cognitive disabilities, to have an ability to learn grade level content standards in high school. And that is an expectation under this diploma pathway. Finally, was the most inclusive environment considered, and has the district or school analyzed how the students receiving their academic benefit? So
and I want to hop in on this one, can I?
Yeah, please.
As an ed specialist myself for more than 15 years, this question is often one that unfortunately goes really undeeply looked at every single year. We tend to have students get to a certain percentage of their time in certain settings. And so as we're really looking at what how much, what is the least restrictive environment for students, that has to become a critical conversation every single year, and a reevaluation and a reinterpretation of how do we support that student in the least restrictive environment, not inclusive of what has been done in the past, looking at what the supports and services they will need that year moving forward in order to be able to be in the least restrictive environment, and taking it from that fresh perspective every year. Do you want to hit anything else on that one, or should I move?
Move on. That was perfect. So we have been out in the world presenting around this pathway for the last few months, last 6 months. And we've heard a lot of myths. And we wanted to share a few with you today. And the first one is that students with extensive support needs don't really need a high school diploma, because a certificate's fine and they're just going to volunteer somewhere, or in sort of a more ableist mindset, well, it's just, we just let them come and work and it's fine. That is not the direction we want to go. We want to value everyone. And in fact, as we know, California is a right to work state under the Lanterman Act, and every single person has the right to work in competitive integrated employment with as much support as they need. And the reality is, the truth that we found out is 90% of employers prefer to hire youth with a diploma, and 66% of jobs still require one. So again, it's making sure that we don't put false barriers in place. Maybe they don't need a diploma, maybe they do, but why would we fall back on that they probably just don't need one? The second myth, students with extensive support needs don't need a diploma because they'll only be able to find work as volunteers and in a supported employment situation that doesn't require a diploma. Again, well, they have the right to work in any position, volunteer or paid position. A high school diploma can provide that opportunity to access employment that require a diploma. So we don't want to set anyone on a path, and I'm sure you would all agree, that gives them any restriction from the beginning, right? And the reality is when someone goes to school and takes all the courses they're supposed to take and learns to their greatest potential, we want them to be honored for that and get a diploma so that they can have lots of choices later. So the Every Student Succeed Act, which took the place of No Child Left Behind, which is the federal act about all of education, put a provision in place because they sort of said they felt the same way. They wanted to raise the expectations for students with more significant disabilities. So California is now utilizing that provision under ESSA that really allows us to offer this pathway to graduation to a regular high school diploma for students with significant cognitive disabilities using alternate achievement standards. So standards that are aligned to our core content grade level standards. So this defined alternative diploma pathway, not alternative diploma, but alternate diploma pathway, because it's a pathway to a diploma, must meet 3 requirements. The first one, it's standards based. We just talked about that. The second one, and that's grade level standards based, right? Those are courses in high school that are based on the grade level standards for high school. They're aligned with the state requirements for the diploma, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes so that everyone has that information. And it's obtained within the same period which the state ensures FAPE for individuals with disabilities. And we'll talk about that too. But students that are on this pathway will still have a right to come back and stay in school until they're 22 if they have other services and goals that they want to meet. Next slide. So this is our California alternative pathway to a high school diploma. This is a real thing. We're excited about this. Next slide. So under education code, this is now in state law that if a student with significant cognitive disabilities, and this is a student who is eligible for the alternative pathway, is eligible for the California alternate assessment, doesn't have to take the California alternate assessment. So if they, for some reason, didn't take it in the junior year, they were sick or something else happened, they just need to be eligible to take the alternate assessment, and they complete the required state standards aligned coursework, they can get this diploma. This really actually started for students entering the 9th grade in the 22-23 school year. Okay, so that's who we're talking about right now. And that can be attending any district, county office, charter school, state special school, and that also includes non-public schools that are under contract with school districts. So if a student is at a non-public school as part of their IEP placement, they also can earn a diploma under their district high school diploma pathway. Next slide. So the California Department of Education recently updated their guidance. You'll see March 29th, 2024. So if you want to refer back to something specific, you can look at the law. You can also look at the FAQs that the Department of Education put out. And we highly recommend that you do that so that you can make sure that you're following current statute. And I would also, if you're not subscribed to their listserv to get regular updates, I would highly recommend that you do that as well. So.
And because sometimes it's not as easy to find all of these things, just know that the slide deck has everything linked for you. So if I were to click on this, which I'm not going to because it'll send us to a website, these are linked directly to the website that they live on, and they're also attached in that home base document for you. So know that everything we've talked about, I see a question asked about the standards linked. Those are all links. Everything will be linked for you in the resources that we provided. So we include it all because we want to make sure you have everything you need to make this happen in real life, because that's how much we love it. So what is this? We had some good questions happening in the chat today about the way that we're wording it. And it seems like maybe it's some nuances, right? To say, like, some people think, oh, alternative diploma, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal to say it that way because that has some ableist ideals behind it. It makes it an other, or you know, that idea that this is different from a diploma, and it is not. And this is exactly how, if you're looking at this slide, which I'm pointing to my side, but I'm going to point forward, this slide explains that this is an alternative pathway, like all the pathways that have come before it, to a high school diploma. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see a list of a number of different alternative pathways that currently exist. We have pathways for foster youth, for English language learners or multilingual learners. We have alternative pathways for our adjudicated youth and our military families, our homeless, or our students experiencing homelessness, and then alternative ed participation. All of those are alternative pathways that have existed for a long time that allow students to earn a high school diploma under the requirements of state minimum requirements. So you can see we have three different, the state requirements are the first column. The second column is CTE pathways, which is another pathway to a high school diploma. And then the third column is our A to G requirements. And you can see that all of those pathways down at the bottom have historically been able to meet the state requirement column right here. And this is just another pathway that meets those same requirements. And so when we actually look at it as an added column, if you look, this alt pathway column and the state requirements column are the same requirements, which mean that a student that has significant cognitive disabilities can now be granted an exemption through this alternative pathway to a high school diploma, utilizing the state minimum requirements. It doesn't mean they have to be only taking the state requirements, that wouldn't presume competence, but that they're only going to be held to the requirements of those state requirements. We also have another document, and I'm gonna, before I even click on it, I'm gonna warn you, don't try and read it. It's terrible to look at. It's more of a visual support to remind you to go here, okay? This is a question and answer guide that can answer some of the questions that we may not specifically address today. And again, it's a link that if you click on it, it will take you to a document that's much easier to read. And it is also listed in your home base doc. But this might answer some of those questions that you've been getting or you've been wondering about around who's eligible. What are the requirements of each of the diploma, the pathways to different, the different pathways to the high school diploma. So know that that's also a resource that you have available. Another question that often we want to make sure that we address is that the alternative pathway provides a provision where students don't need to meet those added A to G requirements that many districts have chosen to adopt. This just allows them through the statute, it's that part of the language in the statute that allows them to meet the state requirements, which for most includes 3 years of English, 2 years of math, the 2 different science years. They have to have a VAPA requirement, those typical requirements that we saw on that previous slide. So just know that that's where it comes from in the statute. In this next slide, this is just a reminder, and I know that Kristin said it, but I'm going to say it again because we often get asked. This does not provide an end of services. As an education specialist who had students that needed continued support but met the high school requirements, in the past it's been very hard for IEP teams to make decisions because they think, or the way it has been written, if you get a diploma, now your services have ended. And for many students, they needed continued support until they were 22 and could receive continued support through regional services. This does not end services. A student can potentially, and I'll show you what that might look like in a few minutes, meet those high school requirements in 4 years and continue in high school working on some of those additional skill set areas that they need more support in. They do not end services for them. So it's a big change in a lot of the ways that we have thought about how diplomas and what diplomas mean at the end of a student or kind of ending a student's high school years. It does not mean that in this case. They can earn their diploma and still go on to continue for those next 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how old the student is. So,
and just to
go
up for 1 second, Steph, and just one more clarification, and that is that we know that students have up until they turn 22 to receive their high school diploma. So that is true of this diploma as well. So while you can receive it in 4 years, you could receive it in 5 years or 6 years. It's really individualized. So just making sure that that we remember that was one of the reasons in IDEA that students were given extra time, was to be able to take the courses that they need in order to graduate. And so one of the concerns we've heard is we still want students to be able to do, employment training and transition goals and community involvement, all those things that are part of transition. None of that's changed. In fact, we would want all that and a high school diploma.
exactly. So we're having some good questions popping up in the chat that I want to address because we have talked about some of these things. So no, just because they can complete it in 4 years doesn't mean they have to. I'm going to show you a variety of courses of study that are sort of samples in a few minutes. So I'm going to put a pin in that and we'll come back to that question. As for certificate of completion, that is not necessarily being taken off the table, but the intention of this statute is that all students should have the ability to work towards a high school diploma, and all students now have a pathway for that. So let me keep going. And if I don't hit all the questions.
Let's just say one more thing about that. And that is that that the certificate, while the certificate of completion is still an option, I think we've heard a lot of phrasing over the years that they're on a certificate track. And I think we want to eliminate that from our vernacular. We don't want anyone to be on a certificate track. We want everyone working towards getting a high school diploma. And now we have the ability and the mechanism for everyone to get a high school diploma. So if for some compelling reason at the end of the day, that student is not able to meet all those high school course requirements by the time that they turn 22, I know there's extenuating circumstances sometimes, but I think planning for someone to be on a certificate track is very different than them receiving a certificate at the end, because the certificate at the end is basically saying, thanks for attending. It doesn't come with it a bunch of other requirements. So just to clarify. However, like Stephanie said, it's not taken off the table. It's just that we hope that folks would give students and presuming competence the most access that they could have to all their courses and new information.
Absolutely. There should be no certificate track because all students should be on a path that is intentionally designed for them to be able to earn a high school diploma. And if and when at the end, there's a need to have that discussion, it happens at that point. So all of my early educator people, all of you that are on this call that are hearing, or those of parents and families and that are talking about early education, we are not only talking about high school right now, because this starts as early as a student starts school. So we should be planning for a diploma for every child from the start and doing what we need to do to support them in that. Okay, there are questions I'm seeing. Please know that I'm not ignoring them. I just know I'm going to answer them, or Kristin is going to answer them in a few minutes. So if we don't, we'll come back to them. I am loving the cheers and the claps and the agreement and the smiles I'm seeing on people's faces. This is as exciting for me as it is for you hearing this. So how do we do this? Like, this is one question that we get a lot. How is it possible for us to do this? First and foremost, I need everybody to lean in real quick. This does not mean that we are just rebranding our ILS or separate setting classrooms into being standards aligned. That is not what we should be doing. That is not what is that you're going to get a hand slap eventually about that. We do not want to just be doing the same things and calling them something else. We need to be providing students with access to standards aligned curriculum. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I'm seeing a lot of creativity, and a lot of people are asking questions, and I'm having good discussions with different districts and different counties around what does it look like to provide that. So sit with me, because we're going to go through a couple of options of what it can look like. But first and foremost, we want to look at the ways that students are receiving instruction. All students are receiving instruction. And as a UDL junkie, I know I've got a whole bunch of UDL friends in the room, everybody that understands the power of universally designing our classrooms and our instruction and our content. That is something that we need to focus on universally in our schools, because it then provides a pathway for all students to have an easy ramp access into every classroom environment. And if all classrooms are universally designed, then they should be accessible for all students to be able to access standards aligned curriculum. They may need supports to make that happen, but they at least have an easy accessibility because it's been universally designed. Other areas that we know are going to be successful are project-based learning environments are very accessible by nature. Those are great places for us to right now think, we don't have to do much to change. We just need to look at it and maybe create a participation and support plan for students to be able to access that have more extensive support needs. We need to increase our consultation between general education teachers and our education specialists, because they both have such high specialties. So even if we're continuing to provide instruction for students to standards aligned curriculum outside of the general education classroom, that doesn't negate the need of our content specialists working with those education specialists in order to be able to really understand the standards. As an ed specialist myself, for many, 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 many years, I didn't go to school to become a high school math teacher. I don't know every nuance of every standard. I don't know all of the things that I need to know for science, but I did have really amazing partners in the field that were great resources for me to connect with and ask them about the content. And then I got to share the ways that I was adapting those materials and making them universally accommodated for all student needs. And then they were able to use that in their own classroom. That collaboration will be powerful in seeing students have access in a variety of ways to high expectations and levels of understanding that they haven't had in the past. And then we need to make sure that the courses we do have are actually standards aligned, which many of them are not. So as we think about the courses we currently offer to students in separate settings, especially, how standards aligned are they, and in what ways do we need to be making shifts? So those are a couple of the common core areas. Kristin, you want to hit these other ones?
Yeah, and we had a question in the chat about students with specific learning disabilities, sort of it was a group defined in the work group we did as the middle group, students who did not have significant cognitive disability. So they didn't qualify for this pathway, but they were still struggling to meet the high school requirements for a diploma. And what I would say about that is related to this is that if we are planning for giving kids, every student access, even our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, we should be thinking of the whole continuum of learner and how our students in that middle group with learning disabilities get access through some of the things that Stephanie described earlier: better universally designed lesson planning, project-based learning, CTE, and also just very much intentionality around knowing all the learners in your classroom. And if districts are and schools are adopting curriculum from publishers, this would be a really good time to talk to your publishers about creating something that followed the same scope and sequence, even if you had separate settings and special day classes, so students were able to be learning similar things, so they could have more opportunities for inclusion. Right now, when we have very separate curriculum that is not necessarily standards based or aligned, that is for multiple grade levels, it's hard to do those inclusive opportunities because kids are learning very different things. So there is some power in being able for those adoptions to be able to really think about pushing on the publishers, and I hope some publishers are on here, to really develop that curriculum. And then thinking about the, just quickly, thinking about the, that there are still tools out there from the consortia who developed the alternate assessments, the 2 national consortia, and those links are in there if you want to see how they've broken the standards down into making them more bite-sized pieces. Also, there's some really good work happening in California right now. If you, I would say to reach out to your SELFA director. I know there's a number of SELFAs who've been doing some great work with their districts around breaking up the standards to really be able to pinpoint how to instruct in this alignment, so we can move on.
All right. So we have a lot to get through in 16 minutes. So I'm going to show you what I can show you, and just know that this is meant to be a resource dump, if nothing else. We want to give you the information, but we also want you to have a deep understanding that this is resources. Come back. We are also resources for you. So if we were to look at creating a course of study for a student who needs to meet the state requirements for a high school diploma, as a counselor, you would sit down and you would come up with these. So any of my secondary people would understand that this piece right here, I think you can see my mouse when I move it, right? When I move it, okay, cool. This is a very typical practice that counselors do as a incoming freshman. I have 8th grade girls. As they're going into freshman year, they have to design a tentative course of study of the things that they want to take, and making sure that they're meeting all the requirements. Lots of people have Naviance or different programs like that do this. But what we're now asking to have done is the same thing. What we're saying is all students should be having a course of study created at the beginning of their high school career. They should be thoughtfully thinking through in what ways and in what courses will we take to meet these requirements. So this is just an example of what most districts already have. Now, looking at this next slide is one of a number of sample courses of study. So these are the requirements on the left-hand side that show 3 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of science. I'm going to say we are not going to talk about the algebra requirement, but our slides do. They're hidden, but they're all there. And so know that you have the resource to get more information on some of these things that you're probably thinking about, but we don't have time for. We answered them. They're just in slides. So take a look at those. Science, 3 years of social studies, the elective VAPA CTE course, and then 2 years of PE. In this example, you see that these English classes are being done with some modifications. They may have a variation of either a co-taught math class or maybe a separate setting math class. Same for these science classes. We still have our living skills or our health classes, the courses that we would need to meet some of our transition type goals. But mixed in there, you also see a variation of some co-teaching for social science classes, PE or adaptive PE, general education electives. What I really want to point out here is if you look, the white are all of the requirements that are needed for state requirements. The yellow are all of the time within a 4-year course of study that students will be able to take all of the additional coursework that they need to support the rest of them as a whole child, right? The rest of their areas of need that have been identified by their IEP. Now, in this particular case, this one highlights using existing courses that are already available and adapting them to meet the unique needs of students. So this wasn't coming up with, you know, all these other things like, what are we creating new courses, which may be needed. But if we're in a place where we're thinking, how do we start and not get stuck in thinking it's going to take us 5 years to get a course of study? No, it's not. We have courses. We just need to be thinking about the fact that we're talking about 1% of students. 1% of students would be meeting this eligibility. So instead of feeling very overwhelmed by it, we think, okay, what do we have? And how do we need to make some adaptations for the students that meet the eligibility for this? And it maybe makes it feel a little less overwhelming and helps us think through, how do we do this with what we have? Now, this next example, same thing. This left-hand column is the pink, in pink is the requirements. And you can see here we use some fundamental courses. In this case, these might be separate setting. These might be courses that are already existing that meet the high school requirements, but they're taught by an education specialist. Here we have math and algebra in the general education setting. Maybe they're going to have adaptations to that, maybe not. These are some fundamental science classes. Again, these would be taught by an ed specialist, but towards the standards, you know, aligned with standards. So that in this example, you see a little bit of both. We see some separate, you know, some courses taught by education specialists in a separate setting, also mixed in with having general education courses and working within that realm. Many schools and districts offer courses taught by education specialists in what we've historically called like a mild mod setting, right? So they're courses that have been aligned to grade level standards. Those exist in a lot of places. We need to start thinking about how those are services and supports, and how could those settings help us to be able to align this for students to give access to everyone to standards aligned curriculum, and not just, you know, isolate students into, like we heard before, square pegs, round holes. We don't want any of that. We need to be thinking about what we have as supports and services. And then this last example is, and I'm not going to hold on to it too long, but is current SAI, or, you know, specialized courses with existing general education courses, using either modifications as needed to access, not modifications to the standards, still standards aligned, or co-teaching or co-teaching. So this is sort of a bringing together of all of those different things. Maybe we start thinking about, how are service providers providing supports? Can we do more co-teaching? Can we increase capacity across the entire system to give our general educators access to an ed specialist to help them with making those universally designed and then intentionally planned for each student? So consider each of those as just potential offerings, but we wanted to help people see what it might look like. Does that make sense? A lot of people ask for, like, well, what does that mean? What does it look like? So we tried to come up with a variety of options for that. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of questions about, how do we align systems? And I'm going to click quickly through these next 3 slides because we want to answer some questions, but I want to show you that they're there, to know that there's things we're going to have to address, like master scheduling, report cards and transcripts, course descriptions and course catalogs. Go back and look at this as a resource about what that might look like. Note that the transcript is a way that we still have the same rules that have always applied to transcripts. There's links to where that's listed in the statute online available as well, and on the next slide. But the high school diploma, this was a question someone asked earlier. Is it a different diploma? It sure isn't. It's a high school diploma. It's the same high school diploma that a student would get if they were on any, let me say it this way. There are some districts that we have heard that have a district diploma for students who are utilizing the alternative pathways. So students that are foster youth, students that have military families, that whole list that I talked about earlier. There are some districts that choose to give a district diploma. Do we support that? I have feelings about othering. But that being said, we also know that 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 they should just be a diploma. So this diploma should look no different than any other diploma. It is a diploma. As we showed before, it is just another pathway to meet the requirements for a diploma, not a specific kind. It's just a diploma because they're
And I
all
think
diplomas.
it's important, yeah, and it's important to note that that the state of California doesn't have a diploma, so there's no state diploma. There are requirements for California for students to receive a high school diploma, and those are given at the district level. So if you're in a district, we have other examples. So if you're in a district, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to provide you some more examples of that. But don't let any of these things stop progress. These are adult problems that can be solved. We want students to be able to get diplomas that they deserve.
So here's the stuff about transcripts. Again, we want to get to the questions, and we want to give you a takeaway before we go. So we need to think about, what are our next steps? What are the next things that we're going to do? How can we be the next, or contributing into how this is going to be a real thing? I have a friend that likes to always say, what's your +1? And I'm a big fan of your +1. What is one thing that you could do moving forward to help ensure that students have access to this alternative pathway to a high school diploma? It depends on your role, is what I will say. If you are at the district level, you have responsibilities to be looking at a variety of different areas where the system needs to change. But families and ed specialists who often feel kind of held to all these other systems, you still have power and impact. This slide really gives a list of different ways that you can have your +1. And what I want you to notice is, if everyone in the system that you currently are part of does a +1, we create a snowball of all the things happening in much faster succession than if we wait for somebody else to do something before we step in. So if you're in the position to be able to review board policy, get on it. That's what you need to be looking at. We need to all, who are part of an IEP team, make sure that there is alignment for the students to be on a pathway to a high school diploma, and that we're addressing expectations and challenges that exist for making sure that we're on that pathway. We have to look at the rigor in which we are setting students up for when we write those IEPs, and making sure that we're doing it in a way that aligns with them being able to earn a high school diploma. We have pathways for everybody now, so this should be it. If we're at a level where we get to be an administrator, either at a site or a district level, all teachers need to be trained in inclusive practices and universal design. You are in the right place. This is a beautiful place for us to be able to get the resources needed and to connect with the right people to get people trained. We have to build systems of support for our educators. You may be in the position of adopting standards-based curriculum, like it's your job, you're a curriculum specialist or you're a curriculum director. Make sure that it's all settings have access to standards-aligned curriculum. We need to make sure that courses of study that we're talking to our counselors about, that they're aware of their responsibility to make sure every student has a course of study, that we're thoughtfully thinking through a diploma for all students. If you are in the place where you're like, looking at how does transition work? What is the planning process for that? Lean in on that, understanding the alt pathway as part of that. And then for our families who are like, we want this, how do we make it happen? I keep seeing you, I know, I hear you in the chat. Share resources with IEP team members to make sure that we have a shared understanding. We're dumping a ton of resources to you for a very specific reason. We want everybody to have common understanding of what we're asking through this statute. What is the statute saying is the right of all students? And so that's why we try to create as many things that were common and could help us have these very good, meaningful discussions. And so bring this forward, share these resources so we can all be on the same page. And one last time, for all my early educators, please start these conversations early. It's so much easier if we can start this year and forever on, every child is on a diploma pathway. Oh my gosh, like look at how things will change for us. And I am so encouraged by early educators who are starting to listen and want to be part of this. So keep it up. Let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward.
And one more exclamation mark on all of that is that we don't want to say we're thinking about this, we're getting ready to be able to do this, because the ship has sailed. we want to make sure that our students that we have now are getting access. So if they haven't yet, it's not too late. Start giving them access to their grade level curriculum and their courses. And by 22, they can get their diploma.
And so finally, how do we move forward before we get to your questions? How do we move forward? Well, we need to all understand universal design for learning. And if you are like, I've heard about it, or I think it's cool, I get it, I sort of get it, wherever you are at in that spectrum, there are trainings and courses for you. And guess what? We are literally sitting at the conference of some of the greatest resources that are available from SIP. SIP has partnerships and incredible resources on their website that allow you to deepen your knowledge, that allow anyone to be able to deepen their knowledge in what is universal design for learning and how do we become more universal in designing our education system so that all students can thrive. And so we also have other partners. We have open access, and there's a link. And we also have the Cecil grant, who are some amazing partners. All of these partners have very strong intentionality to help us build universally designed education systems. And so please reach out to them if you want this for your staff, wherever you are, please, 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 please. And I'm going to give one last shout out to our SIP friends. Katie Novak, who is a rock star and a great trainer, there is on their website, on the SIP website, you can access online UDL courses. So please do that, share it with everybody. Let's make sure that everybody understands how do we prepare spaces meaningfully for all students to be able to succeed and have positive outcomes long-term. That is our charge, that is our call. All right, Kristin, you take it away.
Well, I think we have 2 whole minutes to take a question or two. If there's any more questions, again, feel free to reach out. You have our contact information. We really appreciate you coming today. And I like how this is. Yes. Any other questions that you want to address, Steph? I'm looking in the chat.
I'm trying to read them as fast as I can.
You will have access to all these materials and to recordings, I believe.
Yeah,
and Kristin,
yeah.
here's one from the Q&A function. Is there a standards-based alignment breakdown that people can use for a resource? For example, lots of students, high school students taking the CA are still working on one-on-one correspondence, and they may be nonverbal, and they have IQs lower than 50. So it would be helpful for our teachers to have something that breaks down each standard for each subject to the most developmental level that would still meet the definition of aligned with grade level standards for high school students. Sorry, that was a mouthful, but I'll turn it over to you.
Totally appreciate that question. 2 things I want to address on that. One is we want to make sure if they are a non-speaking individual that they have communication. So big push for that functional communication so that we know what they know and that they need to know next. So I'm not a huge fan of the IQ conversation when we have a student who's non-speaking, but Steph, do you want to take that one in terms of?
Absolutely. So when we know we are all moving into maybe some experiences as educators that we're not as familiar with. I mentioned before, as an ed specialist, I don't know all the standards. Actually, I know a lot of them because it's taken me a long time, but we're not trained in that. So using some of these resources that we briefly talked about help to be able to understand how to scaffold or how to kind of unwind a standard so we can create a ramp for students. These resources kind of help provide that. So please, please, please look at them. In addition to that, I know y'all need to go. I know we're at the end of time, but we did give you our contact information, and please feel free to reach out. There's also we didn't go to them because they're past our last slide. All of these are some more resources. So if you want more content connector resources, there's a whole bunch. If you want more resources on how to teach, or what to teach and more, literally we have resources after resources after resources. So please know that we are a resource to you, but you also have additional resources in everything we've given you. If you find that you're having trouble, like just figuring out what to click on, send me an email. I'll give you an easy to break down email of where you can find the different things. So we hope that this was helpful. Please give us some feedback, because if it wasn't, we need to change it so we make it more helpful for everybody. But we appreciate your time. Thank you all for being here.
Absolutely. Kristin, Stephanie, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for your attendance and your commitment to all of our students and their families. At SIP, it's our mission to accelerate our educational systems to innovate, include, and impact positively for all from birth to childhood and beyond. This presentation, the slides, the resources, they can be accessed in the session description section in our agenda page. If you have any additional questions, please head over to the information booth. You may be able to find your answers there. Up next, we have a little bit of time with DJB Diamond, followed by some more breakout sessions to follow right after that. You can connect with people who are in attendance in our social lounge, stop by to our photo booth, take a selfie, post it, tag us at SIP Inclusion, and use the hashtag SIPCon 2024. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie, Kristin, special shout out to our ASL interpreter, Ms. Joyner. Thank you so much for your services. With that, have a wonderful rest of the conference and a great rest of your day.